Hey guys, so today I've just got a few tips for you on landscape photography. So first, we're going to look at what gear is best for landscape photography.
You will need a DSLR or mirrorless camera, a wide-angle lens, and a sturdy tripod.
So now you know what gear is perfect for landscape photography. So with that said, let's move on to the first tip. So tip number 1 would be try using a telephoto lens for landscape photography. So using a telephoto lens for landscape photography can give a much different look to, say, a wide-angle lens like this one. So with a telephoto lens you can isolate something such as maybe a tree in a field, something like that, and it just looks really interesting. Have a look at this shot that I took with a telephoto lens. It's interesting, isn't it? So obviously with a telephoto lens though, you will have to use a narrower aperture than you would with a wide-angle lens, because the depth of field varies a lot between a wide-angle lens and telephoto lens, because of that depth compression, and because you're using a longer focal length, there's a lot more compression than a wide-angle lens. So probably use an aperture of maybe f11 or f16. This will ensure that you have everything in your photo in focus. So tip number 2 would be to use a polarizing filter. In particular, a CPL filter, which is a circular polarizing filter. So circular polarizing filters work really well with landscape photography, and they screw onto the front of your lens like this. So what a circular polarizing filter does is that it will allow you to cut reflections out of your photos. So say for instance, if you're shooting maybe a lake, you can get rid of those distracting reflections on the water if you want to. Another thing that they work really well for is they make your sky look really blue and really nice. Clouds, they make them look so nice. It just adds that sense of depth to the sky, and it also makes trees look really nice, vibrant and healthy, and they look really nice. So yeah, that's tip number 2, use a circular polarizing filter. You'll be surprised with how good your photos will look with one. So tip number 3 for landscape photography is to use a tripod. So tripods are really handy in landscape photography, and if you've ever heard anyone say that a tripod is for beginners, it's not. That's an absolute myth. So tripods are used by professionals everywhere. I know I can't go without a tripod. They are so good for landscape photography, because say if you're taking a long exposure, just that brick wall is just not going to cut it, because you know you can't have that flexibility, you can't move your camera around on a brick wall, it just stays in that one position. So instead use a tripod, because they are so handy. And those long exposures, if you get a really sturdy tripod, you'll be amazed with how good your photos will turn out, because if you get a flimsy tripod, there's that little bit of shake. Even when say you take the photo, that shutter is gonna run vibrations down the tripod, and even that might make your photo look a bit blurry. So definitely use a tripod for landscape photography. They are so useful. So tip number 4 for landscape photography is to use a long exposure. So long exposures are really good for when you're shooting in low light conditions. They work really well for sunrise and sunset. So long exposures are they can give you some really interesting looks to your photo. So for instance, if there's some fast moving cloud in your landscape, then that long exposure is going to capture that movement of the clouds and add a sense, obviously, of movement to the shot, which looks really interesting. Just add that really nice dynamic look to the shot. You can also use long exposures for water. That looks really nice, because obviously, especially at the ocean, you get those waves coming in, and obviously they're moving all the time, so they'll blur out. And particularly around rocks, they look really nice, because you get that really nice misty water effect. It looks really pleasing. So try using a long exposure for landscape photos.
A long exposure is when your camera's shutter is open for an extended period. Long exposures can range from half a second or longer, sometimes hours or even days. Long exposures will make anything that is moving look blurred, so you'll need to use a tripod when you take long exposure shots. As I said before, long exposures can make scenes with moving water look really nice. So you might be wondering, how do I actually do this? So I've come up with a test that you can try out to see how. You will need a Pyrex baking dish, an LED light like this one, a jug of water, and a DSLR or mirrorless camera. Oh, and you'll also need a tripod. Attach your camera to the tripod, turn on the LED light, turn your self timer on, and you're ready to start. Once you have all of these things, get your camera settings prepared. Start with a shutter speed of around 5 seconds and change your aperture and ISO to compensate so your photo doesn't look too bright or too dark. Once you've done that, make sure you have the self timer on, focus on the Pyrex dish and press the shutter. Start pouring just before the camera takes the photo and keep pouring until it's finished. I'll warn you though, don't pour too quickly, it can get messy. Now look at the results. You can experiment with different exposure times to change how the water looks. Good luck, guys!
So that's just a few tips on landscape photography for you. Hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned heaps. If you want to check out my website, go to www.digitaljourneyphotography.com, and of course check out my Facebook page. That's at Digital Journey Photography. Thanks guys, and until the next video, I'm DJ from Digital Journey. Cheers!